When Prince Harry agreed to sit down for one of America's most respected interviews, expectations were high. Viewers anticipated reflection, honesty, and maybe even reconciliation. Instead, what unfolded became one of the most uncomfortable televised encounters in recent memory. A conversation that slowly collapsed into tension, defensiveness, and finally, a dramatic walkout that left the studio frozen in silence. What began as calm discussion turned into something far darker, revealing not just conflict between interviewer and guest, but a deeper struggle between accountability and pride. The interview space itself was quiet and restrained, designed to feel intimate rather than performative. Two chairs, soft lighting, and the unmistakable seriousness of broadcast journalism set the tone. Anderson Cooper greeted Harry with warmth and professionalism, but Harry's body language carried an edge, relaxed on the surface, yet guarded underneath. He opened by acknowledging that the public wanted answers, though his tone suggested obligation more than willingness. From the start, it was clear this would not be a typical sit-down. As the discussion began, Anderson asked about Harry's new life in America, his work, and the transition from royal duties into private living. Harry responded confidently, but with a sharpness that surprised viewers. He spoke about freedom, about finally escaping tradition, and about being treated as more than a backup figure in a rigid system. Though his words sounded hopeful, they carried an unmistakable bitterness beneath them. Anderson gently offered that tradition also gives people stability and comfort, but Harry dismissed the idea, calling tradition a disguise for dysfunction and control. The atmosphere subtly shifted as Harry began criticizing the monarchy not just as outdated, but as harmful. He claimed the public admired an illusion while ignoring the emotional cost paid by those inside it. Anderson maintained a calm tone, noting that many still view the institution as symbolic and unifying, but Harry brushed this aside, suggesting that admiration only. When Anderson raised the topic of Princess Diana, the shift was immediate. Harry stiffened, rejecting the idea that her legacy should be used as a lens to evaluate his life. He accused the media of turning his mother into both a symbol and a victim, insisting that her memory belonged to him alone. Though Anderson tried to clarify that many people saw similarities between their independence, Harry dismissed the comparison entirely, accusing journalists of turning grief into storytelling fuel. The interview continued to spiral when Anderson asked about Meghan and the claim that Harry's marriage had distanced him from his family. Harry responded with open hostility, mocking critics and insisting Meghan had saved him from suffocation rather than pulled him away from anyone. When Anderson questioned whether framing her as his rescuer placed too much influence in her hands, Harry dismissed the idea, accusing journalists of being incapable of understanding real partnership. Anderson then asked about raising children in America compared to the UK. Harry replied that his children were finally able to live like normal kids instead of being treated as symbols or pawns in a royal system. When Anderson suggested that his family might have protected them as well, Harry flatly rejected the notion, claiming the monarchy failed even its own heirs. When Anderson pointed out that Harry's public storytelling still exposed his children to attention, Harry shut the conversation down, asserting that he alone decided what was best for his family. At this point, the mood in the room had grown heavy. Anderson observed that nearly every answer circled back to control and asked whether balance was possible. Harry scoffed, arguing that balance was an illusion, that either a person owned their story or became consumed by it. For the first time, Anderson's composure visibly tightened. Shifting direction again, Anderson asked where Harry saw himself in 10 years. Harry responded dismissively, stating that he owed no one a plan or explanation and would live however he chose, regardless of public opinion. The answer carried a tone not of confidence, but of defiance. The temperature in the room dropped noticeably. Then Anderson raised the idea of humility, explaining that people he'd interviewed at their lowest points often shared it. He asked whether Harry believed he still possessed that quality. Harry reacted sharply, accusing Anderson of lecturing and claiming survival had earned him the right to be unapologetic. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Anderson next addressed a growing public criticism that despite claiming to walk away from the monarchy, Harry's work continued to revolve around it. Harry responded that the institution had shaped and scarred him, and that exposing its flaws was both necessary and justified. When Anderson pointed out that Harry financially benefited from those revelations, Harry reframed it as reclaiming his story, insisting survival shouldn't be confused with profit. The exchange grew more hostile when Anderson noted that Harry frequently criticized the press, yet continued seeking media platforms. Harry accused Anderson of recycling narratives and suggested the interview existed because the network needed him more than they needed them. The jab unsettled the room, and even the crew appeared tense. When Anderson asked whether Harry believed his mother would approve of how he had handled his life, Harry exploded, accusing Anderson of exploiting Diana's. Anderson then returned to Meghan, asking how she had shaped him. Harry responded with frustration, accusing the media of obsession and refusing to let his marriage be reduced to headlines. When Anderson noted that Harry repeatedly redirected questions toward grievances rather than goals, Harry grew colder, stating that he owed no one purpose or narrative clarity. That was when Anderson pointed out the contradiction. Harry claimed to reject attention, yet sat before one of America's largest audiences, demanding to be heard. Harry fired back that journalists relied on figures like him for relevance and should remember that before attempting moral authority. The room fell silent. Finally, Anderson's tone shifted. He explained that he had interviewed world leaders, survivors, and people who had endured unimaginable hardship, and what they shared was dignity. What he saw now, he said, was something else entirely. Harry dismissed dignity as overrated and claimed survival was all that mattered. Anderson then confronted Harry directly. He said that nearly every question had been met with anger, deflection, or blame, and asked when Harry would stop looking outward and start examining himself. Harry accused Anderson of judgment and ignorance, claiming no one understood what it was like to live under constant scrutiny. Anderson replied calmly that while he couldn't know that pain, he did know accountability. Then came the breaking point. Anderson stated bluntly that Harry wasn't imprisoned, he was privileged beyond imagination, and that instead of using that privilege with purpose, he treated every opportunity as an attack. He called Harry's behavior not survival, but self-destruction. Harry snapped that he owed no one explanations. "Then why are you here?" Anderson asked. "You reject the spotlight, yet seek it. You demand freedom, yet remain trapped by resentment. You want to be heard, but refuse to listen." Harry exploded, declaring that neither his family nor the institution deserved him, and that perhaps the world didn't either. Anderson's tone hardened as he delivered the final blow, stating that Harry wasn't living his truth, he was hiding behind it. He said Harry hadn't rebuilt his life, he had burned it down, not out of purpose, but out of pride, and that if Diana were alive, she would be devastated by what her son had become. The words detonated the room. Harry leapt to his feet, chair scraping loudly against the floor. He ripped off his microphone, snapped that the interview was over, and stormed out while stunned producers froze in place. The silence left behind felt heavier than the argument itself. Anderson turned to the camera, composed but visibly shaken. He told viewers that sometimes the hardest truths are the ones people refuse to face, and that journalism's role is to ask, even when the answers come wrapped in anger. He apologized to the audience, explaining they had hoped for reflection but witnessed something else entirely, though perhaps something more revealing than scripted answers ever could be. As the screen faded to black, audiences across the country were left stunned. The prince who arrived to tell his story had instead walked away from it, leaving behind confusion, controversy, and one unforgettable television moment. Whether it was the most explosive interview of Harry's career or simply another collision between fame and accountability, one thing was certain: nothing about this conversation went the way anyone expected.